All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jared Reimer. I'm the founder of Cascadio. For those who don't know, we've been in business almost 14 years now and have been in the cloud industry pretty much since the inception. We're one of the few premier tier partners to AWS and also a managed services provider that specializes in cloud managed services. So today we're going to be talking about remote workforce solutions, virtual desktops, end user compute solutions, and Zscaler security solutions for remote workers. So agenda for today, we're going to talk about distributed workforce and how that's the new normal in business. So in the post-COVID era, even as things start to reopen, no one really expects that we're going to go back to 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in the office. Certainly the offices that do reopen will be reconfigured and operate very differently. And our belief is that this is a permanent change. So even if and when an effective vaccine becomes broadly available and deployed, we think that the changes in workforce behavior will stick because in many cases, it ends up being better for both the employee and the employer. We've got some quick end user compute technology demos. Workspaces, for those who don't know, is Amazon's virtual desktop in the cloud. AppStream, you can think of it sort of like Netflix for Windows apps, where you open up a browser window and you can access the application in your browser window, but the actual execution happens on the head end in the cloud. Zscaler has two products, ZIA and ZPA. One is meant to provide security solutions for remote workers and branch offices, limiting and monitoring what they can do with their internet connections. And then ZPA provides a VPN-like connection to private applications without creating a network path, without creating a tunnel. And then finally, we're going to show you behind the curtains a little bit how we do managed services. Our company has built a proprietary data analytics platform for applying data sciences, analytics tech to infrastructure operations. In particular, we're going to show how we use the telemetry that AWS provides us around end user compute solutions to do better managed services support and delivery for our customers. As we said earlier, remote work is here to stay, right? Remote work is not going to be a 1-year thing or a 6-month thing. This is going to be a permanent cultural change, and maybe that's for the better. Okay, so first I want to ask a question. In the year 2020, do you really need servers and desktops? And most companies would say, well, of course we do. We need employees and they need computers and they need applications that those computers can make use of. But it turns out that a lot of the complexity and risk and overhead and cost of IT is in things that really don't add a lot of value. So Windows on your laptop computer or your desktop computer isn't the point, right? It's an enabling layer that lets you get to what you really want, which are the applications and the data. But now there are ways to get applications and data that don't require you to have responsibility for a lot of complex underlying machinery. So if you think of a typical Windows laptop, it has a hard disk or a flash drive, it has a complex operating system. The data may or may not be encrypted on that drive. The operating system may or may not get compromised on that computer. The security policies on it may or may not be perfectly implemented 100% of the time. There's a lot of risk and complexity in heavyweight operating systems on employee laptops and desktops. Similarly, when you think of applications, you used to run servers because you had to. The only way to consume applications or to provide them to your workers was to run them on your own equipment. But over time, more and more application functionality has either become available in a hosted solution or in a SaaS-like web-based solution where there is no application for you to run. You just pay per seat per month and somebody else runs it. And probably the most common examples of that in the field today would be things like Google G Suite, Gmail, Google Calendar, Microsoft Outlook 365, Slack, Zoom, Salesforce. These are tools that lots of people use every single day without actually deploying and operating a bunch of server infrastructure. So here's an old joke in tech consulting. You can have it done quickly, cheaply, or correctly. Pick two. Sometimes with cloud, you get lucky and you get all three. Like if you have a relatively common application deployment pattern or design, you might find that somebody has already done all the heavy lifting for you. and there's an existing reference architecture that you can minimally modify and click to deploy, in which case you have it quickly, cheaply, and correctly. But in practice, life's a series of trade-offs, and you have to think through which of these things are important, okay? Clearly, security is a big deal these days, right? So there's lots of horror stories out there. I don't think I have to convince anyone that this is important. There's the endpoint device, like your laptop, your mobile device, your tablet, your thin client, whatever. There's the whole question around, auditing what people did or didn't do and being able to recreate the steps they took, like which files did they access, did they download them, did they share them outside of the company network without authorization. How do we know if people are working? If they're all at home or they're all at Starbucks, how do we know if they're being productive and doing their jobs? How do we observe without being intrusive employee activity and needs and challenges, like what isn't working for them? There's also a lot of concern about reverse attacks from the edge into the core of the data center. So VPNs historically that were split tunnel had this risk where if your laptop got compromised and you had a VPN up, an attacker could come in over the internet, hairpin through your laptop, and then get back into the corporate network. There's also a lot of concern about being able to study what employees do even when using HTTPS SSL encryption. So if they're not supposed to use Facebook at work and they're using SSL, the best you can do is some sort of, content filter or URL filter, unless you can peek inside the encrypted traffic, which a lot of companies do. There are some significant downsides from a security standpoint to doing that, but a lot of companies think that SSL traffic inspection is a must-have. So there's all of this stuff that you have to figure out, regardless of how your employees are going to work remotely around security. I should also call out that the last mile matters a lot. So if you have people working from home and they're not on modern broadband, which we'll define loosely as fiber or cable, or maybe 5G if it's available, if they're using LTE or DSL, they may not have a lot of bandwidth. They may have cases where the network is inconsistent in its performance. With cellular connections, there's sometimes packet loss or really variable latency. That's usually not a deal breaker for cloud VDI and application streaming, but it can be really problematic if you're trying to do voice and video. So if you're running a call center, for example, and your call center agents have soft phones, I would say it's pretty hard to make that work unless you have consistent end-to-end network quality. Beyond the technical concerns, there's some business concerns here, right? So if you put complex hardware out in the field, like laptops, someone has to patch it, support it, deal with break fix, deal with hardware lifecycle management. The number I usually hear is for every dollar you spend on a laptop or a desktop, you're going to spend $3 more on software, services, employee downtime, remote support, on-site support, business risk around data loss, et cetera, et cetera. Another one is that deploying complex hardware in the field like laptops is capital intensive, and we don't really know what's going to happen with COVID. I personally am fairly convinced that a large second wave is inevitable. That may trigger another round of lockdowns and economic damage. So how do you know if you should buy more laptops or have fewer? How do you know where we're going to be from a workforce standpoint in 6 or 12 months? We don't know, right? So one of the great things about cloud solutions is it lets you dial up or down your spending and your infrastructure based on how things go. But the capital risk of buying all the equipment is shouldered by the cloud provider to a very large degree. You're just paying for what you actually need when you need it. And if you have to make, decisions to scale up or down, it's much easier to do so if everything is in the cloud. Finally, I want to talk about the law of the instrument. So this is the old adage, if all you know is the hammer, everything looks like a nail. So these solutions are not suitable for every scenario. I'm going to call out some corner cases where they might not be a fit or where they might be more challenging to implement correctly. So call centers, because of the voice requirement, anything that does voice over IP or video chat can be a little bit tricky to get right, mostly because you have to have good end-to-end network quality for voice applications. Really precise photo and video editing, those might not be good fits. That's one case where you might want to have a more powerful edge device like a laptop. If your job is video editor, you're probably not a good VDI candidate. Interestingly, you'd think that CAD and CAM, like AutoCAD and things like that, would be similar, but they're actually not. We actually had a customer that deployed this on Workspaces, AutoCAD on Workspaces, and found that it was fantastic, that the performance was great, and the employees loved it. There are GPU-enabled high-power Workspaces instances for exactly that scenario, but I would test it before you do a large-scale rollout of it. Also, you got to consider that your customers may not like it if people are working from home with sensitive data relating to them. Depends on who your customers are. Some customers or some companies have a prohibition against AWS or other cloud platforms because of competitive threat. Some companies want to bleed out residual equipment value in the data center and on the edge, meaning they've already bought the stuff and they want to just burn the last little bit of value out of it before they get rid of it. We think that's usually not a good plan unless it's brand new, but some companies have, long-term depreciation plans around that. Also, I'll call out that TCO is not really the right way to think of this. So it's one factor, but it's not the real reason to do it. The reason to consider this, I think, is because of business agility and focusing on the things that are special about your company. It's not because it's necessarily a whole lot cheaper. It probably is, but that's not really the point. The point is that it's much better and that it lets you focus on the things that matter most to your business and your customers. Beware the apples to oranges comparison between like laptops in the field and cloud solutions. They're not the same thing. They have different pros and cons. And it's somewhat difficult to do a line item cost TCO study between the two because there's a lot of intangible cost that goes into operating your own IT systems that sort of disappears quietly when you use cloud platform services. I'll do the obligatory plug here as someone who works in the industry. It's dangerous to work with cloud things relating to your core business assets, IT systems, data, if you don't know what you're doing. I think learning on the job here is not a good idea. So if you're going to deploy this kind of stuff, you should have a subject matter expert who understands how to do it correctly, securely, who understands how to set it up right the first time instead of going through lots of trial and error. And then also, if it's really business critical, like your employees depend on this, you should consider managed services offerings for 24/7 operational support. That's optional. You can do it yourself, but if it breaks, you may have a long night ahead. Okay, so with that said, we're going to give you guys quick demos of all of these exciting platform technologies. So Workspaces is Windows or Linux desktop in the sky. Zscaler ZIA is secure, controlled internet access for the home worker or branch office. Zscaler Private Access is somewhat like a VPN, but better because you don't actually open a network path between the end user and the data center or the cloud deployment. AppStream takes Windows applications and delivers them to your web browser, even on lower power devices like a Chromebook. And then finally, we're going to give you a peek at the end about how we do operations with data instead of with conventional IT service management tools. So first up is Jay, and I will let Jay take it away.
Thank you, Jared. Hello, everyone. Hi, good morning to you, good evening to us. Hi, my name is Jay, and I will be demoing to you the Amazon Workspaces. So today, I'm just going to show you a day in the life of a cloud administrator as Joe. So what we will do, we are performing 3 tasks. Okay, the first one is that there is a new full-time employee that needs to be created a workspace user, so we will create one. The second one is that there is an employee who resigned, and we will already remove her access for AWS Workspaces. And number 3, there is a request for a VLC and VSDC application for one employee for him or her to use. Okay, so now here I'm using the Workspaces app or the Workspaces, and being the cloud administrator, I will log in to my instance. So let me just key in the username and password. Okay, so we're starting in. Now, I'd like to point out that all the tasks that I just mentioned will be performed in AWS Workspace. Okay, so as you can see from the display, this is AWS Workspaces. We can resize it to fill the screen, and just give it a few seconds. Okay, and notice that the icon for Windows and time does not change, so it actually follows the format of your screen or the medium that you're using. And I'd like to also mention that Workspaces supports full high definition on 4 monitors, and for Ultra HD 4K up to 2 monitors. Now, just a quick note, communication is encrypted via PCOIP. Only pixel display, keyboard, and mouse clicks, microphone, and speaker data are transmitted. And company files are not in worker laptops. So if a device is stolen, no company files will be compromised. So let's go to the first task. Now, we are to create a new workspace user, and in the essence of time, I've already pre-created Jill as the user for uh, the new user or the new employee. So let's get started. So here, I'm going to the AWS Management Console. This is what will be used by the cloud administrator to manage workspaces. And then just click on workspaces here. Okay, now we have here our current users. As you can see, there is no one named Jill, so we will launch Workspaces. Okay, now we can select which group Jill will be a member of. So for this one, she will be part of the full-time employee, and then click Next Step. And then in this directory, we will show all users. Okay, then just select the user that you've created in Active Directory. In this case, it's Jill. Add selected, and then next step. Okay, now that we're here, we can choose what the compute power is and memory that we will be assigning to the particular user. So in this case, I'll just choose the standard with Windows 10. Then next step. And then this one, I just like to point out that for the running mode, we always give the choose the auto stop, so that if the user of the workspace has been idle for an hour, it will automatically log out. Now, for manage tags, this is mainly used for billing purposes, so that we can identify or we can associate it to the user. So in this case, that's the key would be team, and the value will be full-time employee. After that, click next step. Okay, if everything looks good, we can already launch our workspaces. There you go. Okay, let me just go to full screen so that everybody would appreciate using this as the medium. Okay, so once this is done, you will see a notification that it will take about 20 minutes for the new user, for Jill, to use or her workspace to be active. Once this is done, you can set an invite user so that she will receive her login details. Okay, now the next task of Joe is to actually delete or terminate the workspace for Ruth, who has recently resigned. So here in the same workspace console, we will search for her name, and in this case, it is Ruth. If in case there are more than 6 users, you can you can type the name here for the workspace ID or the name. So here we can see that Ruth is available. And what we will do is select her username, and then we can do remove workspaces. And now it will give you a prompt saying that this will be removed, and it will the user will no longer be available to access her her workspaces. So once it is confirmed, you can click remove workspaces. Okay, now once this is done, you will be seeing that it will take a certain time, like 5 minutes, to fully remove the user from the workspaces. So that is task number 2. Now for task number 3, there is a request for Bob to use specific applications like VLC or VSDC. Now, in a real world scenario, there are different departments who should have access to different applications only and not for a general use. So in this case, we have Bob here requesting for additional applications. So in the same console, we will go to the applications manager, click applications, and here are the applications available. Now, I just want to point out that for this purpose, I'm using the Workspace Application Manager, and alternatively, you can use SCCM or Group Policy Installation. Okay, so for this one, I'll be using Workspaces Application Manager. So the request was for these two applications. So select both, and then click on Actions and assign application to users. Now, I will have to select a directory. Bob belongs to the full-time employee, so I will click on this one. And then I will search for user. Username is Bob. Okay, there we go. And we can just select the name of the person, Bob. Click here. And then we go to Next. Okay, now there are two options. You can have them install automatically or required, or it can be optional for the employee or the workspace user. In this case, I will put both as required. Okay, once everything is clear, click Review. And then we can confirm and assign. Okay, in this case, we would like to check if Bob is indeed using or has already received the application. So we will just click there. And, oh, sorry, let me just put this one. Okay, now within Amazon Workspaces, I'll do a little inception wherein I'll access Bob from inside Amazon Workspaces. Okay, so let's type username Bob and his password. And then sign in. Okay, here we go, it's launching. Okay, now this is the instance or Amazon Workspace instance of Bob. Now, how do we check if the application has been installed? So one key giveaway is that VLC is already here. It was already created a shortcut for him. And we can also check with the Amazon Workspace Application Manager. As you can see here, there are two that have already been installed. Okay, so there, this is the day in the life of a workspace user who happens to be Joe, the administrator, and he has fulfilled all three tasks. So that's it for my workspace demo. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay. Greatly appreciated. Up next are Zscaler solutions. And here to talk to you about Zscaler is Gabriel.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to give, I can start with presenting my use case for this demo. So basically, let's say I'm a security administrator and I need to configure access policies for two people in two different departments. So the first person would be Alice, who is a marketing manager, and she's part of the media department. So she's going to need access to social media sites like Facebook and YouTube, but not access to backend resources like the databases and the servers. The second person would be Bob, who is a DB admin for the dev team, and he's going to be the one who needs access to the backend resources, but is not going to need access to the social media sites for his productivity. So to do that, we're going to need to make two policies, one in ZIA and one in ZPA. The one in ZIA we're going to be creating a policy to control access to Facebook by blocking everyone except the media team. And the other one in ZPA is to allow the dev team access to the dev environment. So to do that, we can go to the admin portal. So we can start with ZIA. This is the admin portal, which is hosted by Zscaler. So we can sign in. So here we can see the a lot of features that ZIA can that ZIA has. So aside from the simple features of URL filtering, ZIA also allows you to monitor network traffic and have and block potential malwares. It also lets you sandbox and quarantine files depending on your rules, and it also has data loss prevention functionality. So, but for this demo, we're going to be using the URL and cloud app filtering feature. So to create a rule, to create a policy to block Facebook, we can go here to the cloud app control policy and create a social networking rule. So we can name it something like block FB. And we can set it to all departments and to everyone so that it's a blanket rule to block the website. That's it. So you can also select the application that you want to block. So you can set it to everything, but we are going to be specific to Facebook. So we can, now that we have a blanket rule, we can create a secondary rule with a higher priority to exempt the social media team. So do something like this. So here we can see the criteria for which we can select, we can control the access to Facebook. So we can select which users you want to block, which groups you want to block, or which department. So for ZIA and ZPA to work, you have to integrate them with an IDP. So this can be something like Okta or ADFS, but for this demo, we're using ADFS. And Bob and Alice have their department attributes set to dev and media. So since we're going to allow the media team, just have to select that. It also allows you to select from what location they can access it, what time interval they can access it, and it also allows you to limit the amount of data that website can use and for how long that person can use that site. So now we have that. Just save. And we now have the policy for Facebook. So next we can create the policy to allow the dev team access to their dev environment. We can go to the Zscaler private access admin portal, which is also another website hosted by Zscaler. Here, we can quickly see the applications that I've already predefined that users can access. We're specifically going to be allowing Bob access to an SQL server. And here I have it defined to allow access to the whole subnet where the servers are deployed. But this can also be something like as specific as a server IP or maybe a domain name. You also have to specify the kinds of the port ranges the application can be accessed from. So to create that policy, we just have to go here to the access policy and create a rule. So we can name it this. And here we have the criteria for ZPA. So we can be as specific as allowing access to a specific app or to a group of apps. So since we want to be specific, we can just select the SQL server. We limit it to the department attribute of Bob. And here we can see there are two ways of accessing ZPA and the app. So the first is the Zscaler app, and this is the preferred way because it's much simpler. And the second is the web browser, is ZPA browser access. So this is a use case for when maybe a third-party contractor doesn't have the ability to install software on their workstation. They can log in via the browser and they'll be able to use the application normally for as long as that session exists. You can also limit access according to the network they are on, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll be sticking with these. So now we have those two policies configured. I can show you the perspective of what Alice would see. So here I have a workspace instance with Zscaler installed, and one of the cool things about this Zscaler app is you can install it in strict enforcement mode, which means that if the user isn't logged in to Zscaler, they won't be able to access the internet. So we can see here that I wasn't logged in. And if I try to access Google or Facebook, I won't be able to. But if I log in, so here you can see I am now logged in via to ZTA and ZIA, and I should now be able to access Google. And since we're Alice, we should be able to access Facebook. So I also have a pre-configured rule which blocks illegal websites such as gambling and other material. So you won't be able to access that. And she also won't be able to access the SQL server, which you see here. So here I have another workspace instance, this time with Bob logged in. And since I'm Bob, I should be able to access the internet, like Google. But if I try to go to Facebook, if I refresh, I won't be able to access it. What I will be able to access though is the database, and we can see that by logging in here. And there you go, I'm logged in. So another feature of ZPA and ZIA is it allows you to track user activity. So we can see here in the ZPA admin portal, if you go to the dashboard, you'll see a lot of information on the current users and the health of various applications and connectors. So if you go into one of the users, you'll be able to see what apps they connected to, how long it took, where they connected from, and a bunch of other information about the network. For ZIA, same thing. You can go to the dashboard, and you can see a lot. You have a very broad overview of what activity is going on within the network. So you can also see here what the user has browsed to. See that I browsed to a bunch of sites before this. You can also generate reports using this. Day has predefined ones, but you can create custom ones. So there's user browsing history and other information like that. Other reports based on whatever traffic is going on. So that's it for Zscaler, ZIA and ZPA. There's a lot more functionality than what I can show here in the demo, but I'll be handing off this time for AppStream.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So up next is Nika with AppStream 2.0.
So hello, I will be presenting on AppStream. So as mentioned by Jared a while ago, so it lets the user access applications through a browser. So for this demo's use case, Joe, the cloud administrator, has prepared a limited functionality device like a hardened notepad or Chromebook for Bob, the user, which only has a browser application and is restricted to only allow access to a certain application set via a browser. All right. So in accessing the AppStream session, note that AppStream supports Active Directory integration, but manual creation of users is also supported if there is no Active Directory. So for this demo, I will only be showing an example on how it works with EADFS integration. So a link is generated by the administrator and will be accessed by the user. Okay, so let us now try to access the session as Bob, the user. As you can see my screen, I will sign in as Bob. All right. So while connecting, the applications that we pre-installed in this session are WC3270, Zscaler, and Internet Explorer. So let's assume Bob is a mainframe user. Let us first try to connect using the WC3270 terminal application as soon as this connects. All right. Just a few moments. Okay, as you can see, we will copy and paste the connect command, and as we can see, we can now successfully connect to a browser with a browser to the mainframe and can now log in using our credentials. So with AppStream, Bob did not need to install the application himself in his own personal computer and just accomplish the task using a browser. So now for the security, AppStream allows Joe to restrict applications that Bob can access. So it is important to note that Bob or any user could not install additional applications such as games to the AppStream session. But there is another security issue. So what if Bob is given access to a browser inside the AppStream session? So for network level restrictions such as browsing, we will demo how Joe can use Zscaler. So as long as Joe, the user has not yet logged in the Zscaler application, we can see that we could not connect to any of the sites, Google or Facebook. But as soon as we input the credentials of Bob, I will just input the credentials of Bob. All right. And we sign in. As long as this authenticates successfully, yeah, so it's connecting. So since we configured that Bob should not be able to access Facebook, we can see that we could still not access Facebook, but we configured Bob to access Google. So as we can see, we can access Google. All right, another thing that I want to show you is that Bob could not log out without the password that can only be accessed by the administrator, which is Joe. Before I end, another thing is that once Bob disconnects from his AppStream session, the credentials for Zscaler get erased, thus requiring him to log in again. So I hope you got an idea on how AppStream can be a useful tool in distributing applications securely. That's all for the AppStream demo. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nika. It's really cool stuff. Even low-powered devices like tablets and Chromebooks can deliver really complicated applications, all of which run in the cloud. Okay, so finally, in the last few minutes here, we're going to give you a sneak peek of how we do managed services at Cascadio. So the inputs and outputs into a managed service provider are always changing. New tools come, new platforms come and go. Our platform makes it really easy to add new data sources of telemetry. In this case, the customer is using Amazon Web Services, but our platform supports Azure, Google Cloud, NetApp Cloud, etc. And it allows you to do a really complicated task very quickly, which is taking telemetry, taking all the metrics and events and data about a cloud deployment, running them through an analytics platform, and then pipelining the events and alerts to different targets, like the Cascadio Operations Center for managed services. In this case, Slack is used for communications with the customer, and some Luddites still use email. It's very easy to wire this up on the fly without tearing the whole thing down. And anyone who's ever built complex IT service management infrastructure knows the problem. It's not a static world. Another big differentiation point for our platform is that we don't assume that we know the right answer. We don't know what data is important to collect, so we collect everything. This is much easier because the cloud providers do most of that for us. We don't go after static fixed thresholds like critical is 90% and warning is 80%. You do that as a last resort, right? That's a fail-safe in case nothing else worked, but it's not the primary alerting mechanism. Instead, what you want to look for are deviations in the workload and the pattern and how it operates. If you get good at this, you can actually predict and anticipate most service problems before they become customer facing, meaning you can prevent outages instead of just responding to them. The idea there is that these systems tend to be very repetitive and cyclical in how they get used and how they perform, and you can make predictions about how you think they're going to perform in the future. Based on those predictions, you can take corrective action if the system starts to behave in ways that you weren't expecting. So this is what our operations center might see in Slack. So this customer has a RDS managed database on Amazon, and suddenly the number of connections spiked up on that database when they've always been very consistent before. And because this was a change in the pattern of how the system performed, we raised an alert. This is not the same as waiting for a static threshold to be hit. This is purely based on machine learning and AI. The cloud providers make it really easy to get really good data. They do most of the hard work for you. So this is an event about a Workspaces desktop client successfully logging in, and it tells you the timestamp, the region, which workspace it was, which directory service it used. They give us lots of great time series metrics through CloudWatch. So for example, how many connection attempts, how many of your Workspaces instances are unhealthy. So it's very easy to monitor your fleet of infrastructure. And then finally, we're going to show you behind the curtain how this actually works in practice. So this is the data that we're looking at. Our ops team actually almost never has to go through a dashboard or visualization tool because we surface things that are anomalous. And as you can see here, this is data about Workspaces derived from CloudWatch metrics. So for example, how many directories are stopped, how many directories are available, how many Workspaces instances are available, and what's the instance ID. So you can see in the lower right there which workspace it is. And the idea here is that you want to look for deviations. So for example, session latency matters a lot for voice and video and telephone applications. And you can see here some variable latency to the end user's device. So all of this data is given to you by the cloud providers as part of the service offering, but very, very few companies make effective use of it. Our platform is designed to solve exactly that problem in a way that requires almost no work or expertise on behalf of the client. This is purely done as part of our managed services offering. So finally, in closing, we want to be your partner in delivering these capabilities. This is our usual process. We start with discovery. We learn about what you've got, what you need, what your current roadmap looks like, who your stakeholders are. We do an assessment, typically, that would look at what you've got and try to map that against best practices, against the best technologies, against all of the things that we see coming. We work together to build a roadmap that says, what is the ultimate objective, and can we set a few key milestones that we're going to develop towards to get there in whatever time frame is important to your company. The design work is something we're really good at. So we have a whole team of AWS and other cloud provider certified engineers, architects, DevOps implementation engineers, et cetera, who do this all day, every day, and are really good at finding reference solutions to save time through CloudFormation. We're an agile shop, so we don't do waterfall, we don't do fixed bid, we do team engineering work in conjunction with a client. We're big data sciences and analytics nerds, so everything we do, we put a big emphasis around monitoring and observability and auditability and centralized infrastructure. We're big automation fans, so the best way to verify that your infrastructure is ready and stable and redeployable is to redeploy regularly. So we don't do the once a year DR exercise. We teach clients how to do continuous delivery or frequent redeployment. And then optionally, we can provide managed services. So we can provide 24/7 service and support for your cloud deployments. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. If you have any questions, follow up, you can send them to info@cascadio.com. You can also put them in the chat box and we'll hang out for a few more minutes. Otherwise, we will wrap it up and thank everyone for their attendance today. Have a fantastic day and stay safe. Take care.